Gentlemen, colleagues, I am so happy to see you here on this beautiful day, less than a day before Ukraine achieves the outcome that it has been heading for from the very first day of the Revolution of Dignity, and we sincerely congratulate the people of Ukraine on this wonderful day. What's very important for us is that this week there were a lot of great important events. Among them, that was adoption of the decree to set up the Institutional Capacity Gender Equality Commissioner, and that is very much due to Ivanna Klympush-Tsintsadze, who not only promoted visa-free regime, but also promoted at the same time gender equality and rose it to the new level. We believe that's very significant because without dignity of women, without ensuring gender equality, it would not be possible to ensure dignity for the entire people of Ukraine. Now I would like to pass the floor to Ms. Klympush-Tsintsadze, Vice Prime Minister for European and Euro-Atlantic integration. Thank you, Anastasia. Thank you, dear guests, dear colleagues. Really, it was quite unexpected that the visa-free celebration creates some blocks on the road. However, that makes it possible for us to still communicate, and we are here to a great extent because the leader of the movement, the leader of UN Women, who is fighting to ensure human rights and women's rights above all over the world, Ms. Mlambo-Ngcuka, that she is with us today in Ukraine, and she has come here in the time, and I believe that's especially symbolic, that she has come here in the time when Ukraine is still undergoing serious trial, when Ukraine, having changed the vector and finally, irreversibly, I believe that the vector of its civilizational development, that for us, we now work to ensure those values for which our citizens and us went to Maidan. So I would like to say that in Ukraine, women actually traditionally have always had high social status, and virtually they were equal to men, have been. Because back in the 17th century, the French engineer Baplan described Ukraine, and he described the situation of women, that women were almost equal to men. For example, women could decide on their pick up husbands, in contrast to a lot of other countries in that period. However, in the course of industrialization and in the context of the imperial Russian impact, we started losing that national tradition, and actually now we are going back to it. We are restoring our long-lasting national tradition, and to do that we use the best practices of gender equality that are developed by the countries in the EU and in the Western civilized world. For us, for Ukrainians, Maidan was the turning point when, again, in addition to the other values, we started better realizing significance of ensuring gender equality and really equality, not de jure but de facto, between men and women. So we could see that during Maidan events, men as well as women were struggling for freedom and rights. In the same way, women were among the leaders of volunteer movement. They went to the army as volunteers at the very beginning of the Russian aggression, when our army lacked capacity, was not able to properly protect the country. In that time, we could see the development of the demand in the society for higher role of women in leadership, decision-making, in politics, economy, and public life. I'm happy that we have already some achievements, successes. In the 8th convocation of the Parliament, we made the decision on introducing quotas for one gender, no less than 30% at local elections. I'm happy that in our national strategy, the National Action Plan to ensure human rights that was signed by the President of Ukraine, there is a separate chapter, section on ensuring the mechanisms to fight violence against women. I know that all of you are aware that now the Parliament is working to prepare ratification of the Convention against gender-based violence. And for us, it is especially important that the society supported the ratification, because the problem that it is aimed against is so important, significant for our society, but somehow we keep silent about it, because 68% of women, I mean 68, think about that, that's 18 million women who statistically suffer domestic violence, while 20% of them, and that's in Ukraine, and 20% of them suffer frequently on the periodical basis, regular basis. That's a problem of millions of women here in Ukraine. And I rely very much on support from each of them when we vote in the Parliament and when we ensure institutional mechanisms in order that these rights were protected and that for our society that were inadmissible. Zero tolerance to this very serious challenge. So currently, after the decision-making on institution for gender commissioner, we will now organize the competition for these positions for the commissioner and the office. We are very grateful to UN Women who, with support of the governments of Sweden and Canada, who are able to implement this very powerful and visible project that with which they will help us to set up a monitoring mechanism for implementation of our commitments. And not only that, that's also about implementation of the practices here in Ukraine that are important for any woman to ensure her rights. They will help us to implement pilot projects that will be aimed at setting up the institution of gender advisors in law enforcement and defense institutions. And based on today's experience, I already can see that we need that. They will help us to develop this institutional capacity that will ensure in the government, on the part of the Secretariat of the Cabinet, will ensure coordination of activities of the various ministries, the tasks of which include assisting us, women, and feeling more confident, protected, and competitive in this world based on our professional qualities, based on our capacity and the ability to compete, equally compete with men. So I would like that to be just another step towards that political and economical leadership of women in our society were more substantial. We need to aspire to ensure at least 1/3 of women in the parliament as well. I believe 150 mandates would be just right, the figure that we need to aspire to for the parliament. Obviously that now it is still something to be discussed. However, I believe that it is absolutely achievable, feasible. And there are intentions. I know that in the parliament, the caucus, Equal Opportunities, they are working on ensuring this quota in the election laws for the Ukrainian parliament. I'm sure that in the government, if we had 1/3 of women at least, we would be more efficient. We would have cover a broader picture and range of problems that the society is encountering, and we would ensure a higher quality of decision making. And sure, I would like us to address this very sensitive issue, ensuring peace. There, I also want more women to be involved, not only politicians, not only business women, but also those who are now IDPs, those who are suffering that pain and who understand the gravity of the problem, and those who want to go back home, because they could also contribute into our better understanding and better decision making. So there are a lot of tasks. We need to develop labor legislation to ensure mechanisms to protect women. And at the same time, we need to ensure all over the country understanding of what gender rights are and how we should apply them, how to protect them, and how to involve men as much as possible so that they could help us to implement this task. Thank you. No microphone. Thank you once again, Ivanna, for this inspiring speech. And now I'm happy to pass the floor to Her Excellency Executive Director, UN Women, Ms. Phumzile Mlambo-Ngcuka.
Say, my dear Ivanna.
Very good.
And Excellencies, thank you so much for this opportunity. My short but meaningful stay in Ukraine has convinced me that I need to come back again, because there's so much excitement, a lot of things that I think we can and should be doing together. We also, as UN Women, this visit was also about, of course, checking on the team and making sure that they're busy at work, but also an opportunity to interact with government, an opportunity to interact with parliamentarians, with our partners, with the women in civil society and different formations, and of course, broadly, my colleagues in the UN. We are fully behind the efforts of government to drive change forward, to reduce the impact of the conflict, and to ensure that women are resilient and are able to stand on their own. We know that we cannot do this. You cannot do this alone. You need partners, and that is why sitting here, we are here as those partners that are working with you. I've had first-hand information from the women, both about the challenges that they face, but also about the determination they have to take their situation into their own hands. One of the most encouraging things about the women in Ukraine is the fact that women have high levels of education. So that already is a strong advantage that we do not experience in other countries that are dealing with similar issues. And I think for donors, for investors, to leave that opportunity and not take full advantage of it is to delay the transformation that is required by the country. Because as we say, if you invest in women, you are investing in a nation and change that is sustainable and far-reaching. The longer we delay to invest in women, the longer we delay to get the change that we want. So there's a sense of particular agency to invest directly in women in countries where women are ready to take off. In addition to that, the growth that is required by the country economically, inclusive growth that ensures that you change the lives of the next generation, can only be achieved if you invest in women. So I'm making this special appeal so that all the partners, all the donors who have not seen this as the most strategic intervention to make must know that the clock is ticking against us. This is the best investment with the highest rate of return ever recorded in any country, and there's plenty of data and investment to prove that. So I do want to thank Canada and Sweden for the first movers advantage, being in front of the row and making sure that you can actually demonstrate the benefits that we are talking about. The CEDAW in Action program that is funded by the Canadian government will support government in helping women to better understand and claim their rights. Because when women understand their rights, whether it's the reproductive rights, their right to education, their right to political participation, they take charge and they make change happen, not just for themselves, but also for everybody. And CEDAW is an iconic instrument that we have in intergovernmental relations to look at ourselves, but to share our successes with other nations as well. And of course, Sweden, thank you so much for the Gender and Equality at the Center of Reforms program. Because again, reform is a particular moment in the history of a nation. Reforms are about also bringing about changes, especially after a conflict, including the changes that you otherwise would not have undertaken if you did not have a conflict. So in a way, it is a silver line in a cloud, that in the midst of trying to address something that was otherwise a tragedy, you actually create an opportunity to move far. We have seen this advantage of reforms bringing about far-reaching gender equality. In Colombia, as we speak now, the peace process has created one of the most advanced reforms and benefits for gender equality that we could not have had if the reforms did not take place with the greater participation of women. We did a study ourselves looking at the implementation of Resolution 1325 after a period of 15 years, and the trend that came out there was that in the height of reforms, that was when you increased the number of women who participate politically, because in the process of reforms, you also set targets for the participation of women. Women stand up, they represent themselves. That is why you have seen higher women participating in politics in Afghanistan, notwithstanding the many challenges that we have in Afghanistan, higher participation of women in Afghanistan than the US. Seen women in Somalia, believe it or not.
Didn't realize it.
Believe it or not. So we need to look at these reforms as a strategic moment to push the frontier and to push it as far as it can. And people have relative appetite for change in the midst of the reform. So therefore, the investment that Sweden is making to make reforms a pivotal moment for change, it seizes this very well-known factor of how reforms can bring about lasting change. I also would like to thank also you, Ivanna, for your strong leadership. It was really pleasing to arrive here and hear the new announcements that were being made that will create a gender machinery that will have the capacity to implement the changes that you are talking about. And we just want to assure you that we're going to be supporting in whatever way we can the work that you intend to do going forward. I want to echo also the importance of ratifying Istanbul, because we appreciate the changes that have been made, the laws that are in place, but we need to complete the picture. There is something to be said about working as a group, either a region or a part of the global constituency, in order to make sure that the standards that you set for yourself, you can gauge against the standards that other people in similar position have set for themselves. It also helps to fill in the gaps where national legislation has got gaps. This comprehensive legislation that comes at a regional level, such as Istanbul, does fill in the gaps that need to be filled. So we look forward also to support you as you take that next step, and to celebrate with you when that happens. So I'm looking forward to come for that party, Istanbul party. So thank you very much.
Я дякую пані Мламбо-Ngcuka за її позицію.
Thank you, Ms. Mlambo-Ngcuka, for your understanding of the context of Ukraine and your position and your support. And now I pass the floor to His Excellency, the Ambassador of Canada to Ukraine, Mr. Roman Vasychuk. Thank you so much. Thank you, Ms. Executive Director. Canada is one of the most resolute countries that are supporting Ukraine on its challenging path of democratic, economic, and social reforms. And it is very important for us that men, women, boys, and girls could equally make use of those opportunities, enjoy those opportunities. On the 6th of June, our Minister of Foreign Affairs, Christy Friedland, announced our priorities that are based on values of the Canadian society, and that includes equality of men and women and feminist-based approach to international relations. That is both about our Prime Minister and about our Cabinet of Ministers, where the roles and participation are distributed equally between men and women. Just yesterday, on Friday, our Minister for International Development and Francophonie, Marie Klympush-Tsintsadze, announced our feminist-based policy of international development. For the first time in our history, in our practice, and it is one of the first cases in the global practice. Through this prism, we are going to approach development goals of UN, and we will contribute into economic development both back home in Canada and abroad. Apart from this quite specific feminist-based projects, we also built this approach into almost all activities here in Ukraine. You remember the collection of stories about us or against violence that was published last year in the framework of our project of free legal aid. This week, I set up the Association of Women in Police and in Law Enforcement Authorities at our support. So, I mean, in every project that we implement, we support the role of women and equally with men. And that is why we welcome very much the fact that Ms. Klympush-Tsintsadze acts as the coordinator for gender equality in the cabinet, and we welcome the steps that are being undertaken to ratify the Istanbul Convention. And we know that a lot of hard work was required to create the consensus, and we would like to welcome and support that. Moreover, it is also important that the programs not only remain at the level of central authorities. It's important for us to go into decentralized communities, into the regions, and we need to reach out to the groups that are most vulnerable. These are IDPs, women living in a situation of family violence, domestic violence, Roma communities, LGBT communities in Ukraine. So this mainstreaming of the groups that used to be marginalized, that's also, I believe, an important part of the approach that our project will support, and I guess this project of our Swedish colleagues as well. And so we hope that in cooperation both with UN Women and with the UN system and with the Ukrainian authorities, but also Ukrainians, civil society activists, that we will be able to jointly achieve the objective of equality and prosperity for everyone in Ukraine and globally. Thank you, Mr. Vasychuk, for your personal position, and thanks to the Government of Canada for your support. And now I pass the floor to His Excellency, the Ambassador of Sweden to Ukraine, Mr. Martin Hagström.
Thank you very much. First of all, I want to say thank you also for all of you for being here today. It's a very difficult day today to compete on the kind of the news space. Even difficult to get into press conferences dealing with other matters than the upcoming visa freedom. And of course, first of all, I also want to congratulate all Ukrainians on this big and very positive news on behalf of Sweden. So moving to the subject of this press conference, very happy also to be here, very happy to be here with you, Deputy Prime Minister, with you, Executive Director of UN Women, and very much welcome your visit here. I think it gives us a very, very important and very timely opportunity to talk about many of the difficult challenges that we all share when it comes to gender equality. Challenges like the fact that women are not given an equal say, women are not represented equally, are not given equal resources, and are also subject to violence from men. All these, of course, have been mentioned before me here today, but these are major, of course, challenges that we all share, and that no country can say that they have actually been able to deal with in a fully satisfactory way. We also have challenges when it comes to men. Of course, many of these things are linked to men, but we have challenges like men in general live much shorter and less healthy lives than women. Men are hugely overrepresented in crime statistics. So we have also, when we talk about gender, we're not talking about women, we're talking about both women and men, and we have things that we need to deal with when it comes to both genders. And this is true in all societies. It's true in Ukraine, certainly, as we have heard here before. It's also very much true in Sweden. And that means that we underperform as countries. If we just use the potential of half the population, actually it's not half, because in Ukraine there are more women, significantly more women than men. So it means that we use the resources mostly of a minority of the population to produce results. And of course, that means that we underperform. From my country, in Sweden, there is a very strong political commitment to deal with it from the Prime Minister and down. Just like Canada, we have a feminist policy, we have a feminist government conducting a feminist policy, and we also have a feminist foreign policy. That means, just like my colleague here has described, that also here on a local level, we have to see to that everything that we do contributes to more gender equality. Again, we have not addressed all of these issues in our own societies, but we have worked on it for a while, and we do have some experiences to share, and that is also why we are very happy to be involved in such a project and in many other projects also in this sphere. Lately, we have seen, and I really would like to welcome that, and thank you also, the Deputy Prime Minister, for your personal role in this, a stronger political push for these issues. Many of the steps that have been taken have been mentioned. Most lately, it was the creation of the Office of a Government Commissioner for Gender Equality. We have action plans. We have your special role in these issues. We very much welcome this, and we are very happy that we can support. And this project that was mentioned here before, that we are here today actually to also sign this project, a major new project aimed at strengthening institutions, strengthening policies, strengthening civil society in the area of gender equality and women, peace and security in Ukraine. It's a major project for us. It's 5 million euros over 4 years. Of course, we do hope that this will help to create the fundamental changes in this area. just like everyone else also before me, we very much also look forward to the ratification of the Istanbul Convention. We know that important work is being done in this area, and the purpose of this convention is, of course, to strengthen the fight against violence against women. So we certainly hope that this can happen very, very soon. So finally, we remain fully committed in this area. We look forward to even closer cooperation with all of you and everyone else who is willing to take part in this work. Big thank to UN Women, and a big thank to the team at the embassy who has worked with this. In particular, Olga Sudova, who has been responsible for this project from our side, and Henrik Wittfeldt, who is head of the reform support section in the embassy. Thank you.
Дякую, пане Hagström.
Thank you, Mr. Hagström. And now I'm happy to invite Mr. Hagström and Ms. Phumzile Mlambo-Ngcuka to sign this document that Mr. Hagström has mentioned, and Ms. Ivanna Klympush-Tsintsadze.
Captures the SDGs. Yeah.
That's
So-
microphone.
So this is for you, Ambassador. Going to pierce your nice suit.
It's perfectly okay. I will keep it there. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
And then I have one also for the
Thank
Deputy
you.
Prime Minister. I think it goes well with your
Very
outfits.
It's all foreseen. Thank you.
And one for Ambassador. Come down, Ambassador.
Oops.
This is to make sure that you carry the 17 goals wherever you go. It ain't heavy. You can carry it. So thank you so much.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you.
Я би зараз попросила,
Now I invite the speakers to take their seats on the stage. We do not have a lot of time, but we do have some time for Q&A. And also, I would like to appeal to the journalists who are now watching online broadcasting. And let me tell you that UN Women in Ukraine are always open to any media requests, so please address us. And now we have some time for Q&A.
Anna Lokivanova. I'm from the Tizden magazine from Ukraine, and I've got a question for Ms. Mlambo-Ngcuka. The general perception in Ukraine is that there is no gender equality. When you tell someone about it, people will tell you like, well, women are educated, women can go to public spaces, women can work, women are present in the parliament, but still we all understand that there is gender equality. What do you think are the most evident examples of the gender equality in Ukraine, or how we can explain to the general majority of people that still there is gender equality and it's something that should be addressed?
I assume that you want me to talk about the fact that there isn't gender equality. There's gender inequality in Ukraine. I think it's always important to use evidence and to use data for people to actually understand, but in a simple way. For instance, I think it's important to highlight to people the fact that women live with violence. And it is, there are men also who live with violence, but overwhelmingly, the numbers show in Ukraine that I think it's 1 out of 5 women are beaten up by somebody. Surely that is not equality. Violence against women, domestic violence, is the worst form of discrimination and humiliation that any human being can live with. Because of that, women suffer mental health, they suffer physically, they have to have their bones fixed, they have to have their teeth fixed, they have to have their eyes fixed. Surely there is nothing equal about having to go through that. And of course, the representation of women in senior and decision-making bodies. We know the numbers in Parliament. The only good thing is that the few men that are there make such a difference. You actually feel it's a lot of women. Can you imagine if we were to increase the number of women? So just the percentage of women who are in Parliament. And in a country like Ukraine, it's not a shortage of good women. I, for myself, I can rattle the good women. That's I know just like that. The supply is there, the possibility is there, and the fact that are not there is not because women have underperformed. I don't think that men are there because they overperform. The women are not, and the women are not there because they underperform. It is because society, not just in Ukraine, has affirmative action for men. And for women, you actually have to cross hurdles before you get to where you are supposed to be. So just on the representation and leadership, in private sector also, the underrepresentation of women. Women are not less productive than men at work. So the underrepresentation of women is another concrete evidence that women are not treated equally. And of course, the fact that now we are also wanting to bring about change in the country. I know that the women want to play a significant role in influencing the changes in the country. Their involvement in driving the peace process is not at the same level as that of men. And yet, we know that when women are involved in addressing and driving peace processes, the quality of the peace is much better. Evidence shows that in countries that have been in conflict, the conflict reignites much sooner when we have not been inclusive in addressing the peace. And where women have been there, peace lasts longer. I rest my case.
Дякую за детальну відповідь. І ще будуть запитання із зали.
Thank you for detailed response. Any questions from the audience now?
Follow-up question maybe. You already started talking about certain practical implication of the women participation, but if to be even more practical, what could we cite as expected positive outcome of the increased women participation, maybe in terms of social and economic issues for Ukraine?
Okay. I'll give you an example. Having been a woman who participated in bringing about change in my own country, the first thing that we did in Parliament was to change the laws that discriminate against women, all of them. As a result, South Africa is one of the countries in the world that has no laws that discriminate against women. It doesn't mean that women are not discriminated, but there isn't a law that discriminates against them. And it was because women parliamentarians just made that their focus, and women across all parties. So you'd actually, and we also made sure that the Constitution itself enshrined gender equality. Of course, when women participate effectively in the economy, you create income security for families, because women will be able to have an earning power, to bring resources to the family. And when women have money and resources, they always reinvest in the best interest of their families. So the health outcomes of a family are improved, which means that as a nation, your health budget is already being protected because you reduce the number of people who are sick. Women also use the resources and the money that they have very much to address the educational needs of their families and their children and their relatives. You know, if you go to a maintenance court in any country, The people who have complaints against missing fathers who should be supporting their children are usually men. I've never seen a queue of men who have come to complain about mothers who are not supporting their children. So this most basic thing of being a present and a supportive parent, when women have resources, they take care of that. But also, women's contribution in the economy is also essential. Evidence shows that in the private sector and everywhere where you've got gender diverse leadership, the performance of those institutions outperforms the performance of their peers. So in terms of contribution to GDP, in terms of contribution to productivity, you also lift the economy of that country. Women also will look at programs that address the issues that impact on older people and other vulnerable groups much more. It just comes natural that women actually do that. When women participate in peace processes, they will, and for instance, when they discuss reparations, they will not just look at the reparations that must go to a combatant who carried a gun and killed somebody. They will look at the reparations that should go to community. How can we rebuild a school, rebuild a clinic, rebuild a road? How could we also make sure that those who did not fight, who however affected by the conflict, who are affected by violence, are also addressed? Psychosocial support, economic activity. The ability for women to look at issues across the board is a strength, but gladly there's a growing number of men who are crossing the line and thinking like that. And that has happened because women have been consistently providing the leadership in this area. We obviously want both men and women to work together. We don't want to have a society where men and women are always put in comparison. We are trying to find a society where both genders and all other genders are actually working together for the betterment of society. Thank you.
Я дякую. І ще будуть питання із залу.
Thank you. Any other questions? Maybe we still have time for one question. If not, then thank you, Your Excellencies, for your speeches. Thanks to all of you here that you've reached these premises in spite of the barriers. And you are welcome to UN Women Office for any further information. Thank you.